Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. The $10 paperback or $2.99 ebook download, including my latest NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. Today,
I love it.
Thank you. Today's guest is also an author. Rita Gigante is the daughter of legendary Genovese crime family boss Vincent Gigante. She's also the author of a riveting new book, The Godfather's Daughter, an unlikely story of love, healing, and redemption, and we're happy to have her here today. Rita, hello and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Vic, for having me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure's mine. Rita, please tell the listeners a little about yourself.
So, as of this moment, because my work changes all the time, but I am a psychic medium healer and spiritual mentor, and also an author and a teacher. So I work with multitudes of people on how they can help themselves rise above any of their traumas that they've had in their life, any hardships, because I've been through the process. I've come to the place I am, and now I want to share that with others.
Okay, and tell us about your book.
Yes. This is the book.
Perfect, got a copy, good.
Yeah, Godfather's Daughter. So this was my catharsis. This was my way of clearing the old energy that I was under in my home. It was a very dark energy as a childhood. Not all of it, but there was a lot of darkness. There was a lot of anxiety and panic and OCD, and growing up in the house with my dad, even if he wasn't in the house, somehow his energy loomed in wherever he was. And so I grew up with a lot of trauma, and I wanted to be able to express that in my way in the book, and then help others on their path to be able to work through their own traumas. So that was the reason why I did it. It has helped me in my healing process, and my hope is that it can help as many as read it.
Was your family supportive when you said, I'm going to write a book?
Well, my family didn't know I was writing a book in the beginning, but when I actually got the contract from Hay House, and it was underway and almost done, it was kind of split, I want to say. My mother was always an advocate for me, but I think she was nervous about what I was going to say and what people would think. And when I explained it to her, she said to me, "Do I need to read it?" And I said, "No, you already know everything." I said, "So you don't need to read it, but you can trust me and that I am not hurting anybody. This is my story. This is my experience. There is nothing in here that people don't know about the family, I want to say, but they don't know my experience, and I wanted to share that." So mom became okay with it. One sister was fine. The other one was nervous for me because she didn't know how others would react, and then she came around. My brothers did not want it to happen. My one brother sat me down and said, "Listen, I'll give them back the, whatever they gave you for the book, and let's call it a day." And I said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that. I have to be able to speak what I feel, my truth, and help as many people as I can." So it was split because everybody thought that this was going to be some kind of tell-all.
Right.
And some kind of, mafia thing. And it really was all about forgiveness, redemption, and love. It was really about the subtitle than it was. I mean, yes, I'm his daughter, but it was so much more about the subtitle than anything. So
I can, not to the degree of what you went through, but I mean, I can speak to working in law enforcement, and when I started to write books, and even guys caught wind of it, I was like, well, what are you going to write about? Like, there was so much, not that I was involved in police corruption, but there are things that people didn't want out there.
Of course.
And I was protective of that, and I still am. I don't mention anyone by name. I don't get too close to the target where I'm going to get someone divorced, in trouble, and sometimes, I'm sure you feel this way, the greatest book in the world you can't write.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I totally understand.
Can you share with our listeners who your dad was?
Yeah, Dad was notorious. He was Vincent Gigante, aka Chin. That's what they like to call him. And so my grandmother really was the one that named him. He was, Chinzy as a young kid. Vincenzo went to Chinzy, and then Chin, everybody on the street loved. So he was the head of the Genovese crime family, but he also was the head of the commission, which meant that he pretty much ran the five families. Like no one could do something without coming to him and asking for permission. So he was the last of his kind in
Absolutely.
doing things in a way that today is just unheard of, unfortunately. But if we had to give that what he did some kind of morals or ethics or whatever, he was it. He was very fair. He was old school, and he didn't take it lightly, and people weren't taken care of. I mean that in a negative way, just because there had to be a reason for it, and that doesn't condone any of it. Obviously, I didn't love what he did for a living, but I understood in the end why, and I understood that, it could have been any CEO of a company, or I see what goes on today in this world, and somehow I look at my dad and I'm like, oh, you might have been able to help in some ways, So he was a genius, and he could have been anything he wanted. He ended up falling into this. But what he did and how he did it was admirable.
When did it dawn on you as a young girl that your dad was different? He wasn't going to Little League games, or
Yeah.
maybe he did. But I mean, when did it
Not.
dawn on you that your dad was different than the other fathers, the kids at school?
Dawned on me right away because he lived with us until I was about a year and a half. I moved out to New Jersey when I was 6 months old, and he lived with us, and then he was gone. And so, all kids, even though they're very, very young, a year and a half, whatever it is, they all understand a certain amount of energy in the house, what's going on, secrets, not knowing everything, but having this understanding or feeling that something's different. And then as I grew up about 8, 9, 10 years old, I was in my grandmother's apartment a lot. We used to go visit him, and I would see him in the apartment with all these men around him, and the TV was on, the radio was on, the phone was off the hook. Nobody spoke above a whisper, usually in somebody's ear or on a piece of paper, and it was handed to somebody. And so I knew something was different. Yeah. And I also knew he ran whatever it was that, he was doing, because they answered to him. You can tell he commanded that energy, and he was a boss of something. So I knew something at a young age, but I also knew I wasn't supposed to ask anything. And so many people ask me, how do you know that? And I'm like, you just know. You just grow up in this energy where you know not to open your mouth. And I would ask my sister, my oldest sister, who was someone like a mother to me, what's going on? Like, what does Daddy do? How come everybody says he's sick? And I was young when I was asking these questions. So the answers would usually be, Daddy has a heart condition, and he did. So he has that. And at first it was he worked for a hat company. That was, right. Something that was thrown out there, which the little me was like, oh, okay, but didn't really believe it. So that's what I had to tell friends that asked, what he did. So I always felt like there was an untruth to it, and never felt 100% right with it. But this was family, and, you felt a commitment to that, especially in an Italian Catholic family, And so that's how it was till I was 16. And then there was so many rumors going around about him being who he was, that unfortunately I had an altercation with a girl at school because she was running around talking about it. And after that is when I really knew for sure. Yeah.
When you were a young girl, you went to your dad was a presence down in Little Italy, and then on the west
Yeah.
side. Did you go to the San Gennaro festival when you were a kid? Like, did you go down it?
No, because that was John Gotti's area, and we never went to that. Dad had his own feast. It was St. Anthony's, and it ran usually from the beginning of June to the middle of June, and that's where we were. That's where we hung out, and it was awesome. Some of the best times of my life was at that feast. In the stands, like helping my brothers. They would allow me to come in and just hang out and do some stuff. So that's but his presence, you felt his presence that strong no matter when it was. Just walking down the street with him, you can feel that. You knew there were always stories about him taking care of people in that neighborhood, whether they didn't have food or money for the rent, especially the elderly. He loved taking care of anybody that had kids that did not have. So he protected that neighborhood. And so many people, whether they knew him intimately or not, I want to say honored him because of that.
Your dad mystified and baffled law enforcement, as well as the other mafia families. They really didn't know what to make of him, but they were afraid of him. Mm-hmm. I know your dad didn't talk work with you, but inside the walls of his apartment, was he amused that he was able to fool law enforcement?
Oh, 100%. I mean, he was in character most of his life. I want to say he broke character on, more than a handful of occasions, and I was the youngest, so there was something about my energy that he could break character if I kind of brought that to the table. I want to say, like, I was funny growing up, and so he saw the humor in me. And so sometimes I would dress up like my grandmother and, walk around the house, and he would just get a kick out of something like that. Or I would put Elvis Presley on and he would get up and I'd make him get up and start dancing with my mother. And, he had two left feet, but these were times where he was a father, where he was a man that was not that or was not his work. So those were the times where I saw that humanness come out of him. He was very gentle with me because of all my anxiety and things that I witnessed as a child and why I had the anxiety and the panic. So I was sick a lot as a child, and he would rub my back and I would fall asleep. And those were the times where I felt connected to him. Like I would be laying on his lap and this would be happening. So there were also times where I would witness a doctor coming in and him going right into his act, and short of like having to go under the table to laugh, this was what he did. He would act out a character that was on TV. Maybe it was a cartoon, and so this was our life. Everybody was involved, and we did what we had to do to help protect him.
I mean, he was confident, obviously, that the act was working, but like you knew your father. Do you think that he was always waiting for that other shoe to drop? Or, yeah, he had
I
that
always said that, to have to look over your shoulder your whole life and not to be in prison with bars, but you're really in prison because you're always waiting for someone to. But he went as far as checking himself into, a mental hospital in Harrison, New York, St. Vincent's. When he thought someone was close to him. And so he would check himself in for 3 weeks, and we had to go there and experience horrific, I want to say energy, because people were really sick. I had a hard time with that, a very hard time with that. Because part of me felt like there was a mockery of the people that were really ill, and here we are like pretending that he's sick that way. And it was sad. It was very sad.
You think he was nervous when he had to go in there? Like, there's got to be a fear in the back of your mind that, yeah, I'm playing this role and I'm going to go in there to kind of get the feds off my tail. They're going to think I'm crazy. But you think it ever dawned on him that maybe one day they might keep him in there?
No,
He
I
had
don't
that
think
kind of confidence.
he did. I don't think he had that fear at all. And it didn't seem, in my eyes, it didn't seem to affect him the way it affected me. He was strong. He was strong-willed, strong energy. I think he can compartmentalize because he was doing it for so many years, and it was just another thing he had to do to get to a place where he felt comfortable enough where they weren't tracking him.
Your dad he played this game of cat and mouse with law enforcement and of the other mafia families for 30 years. Did he ever take a vacation?
On his honeymoon with my mother.
That's it.
That's it. One vacation. Otherwise, he was pretty much in the neighborhood unless he had to go to a doctor's appointment. Or he went uptown to his other family, which he did often. But other than that, no.
Was there something that brought him pleasure? Like, did he have like a vice that you know what I mean? Like something that he could do that would make him unwind and get away from all that?
He loved playing pinochle with the guys because he allowed me to come in to that space and sit with them. We'd watch football sometimes and he would relax. When my mom would stay with him, or sometimes we went for the weekend, or he was at my house for the night, you could see him relax I would know by his body language,
Right.
And you could see him relaxed. But those were the only times that I saw him actually relaxed. I didn't know him to be anxious or afraid or anything like that, to be honest. I don't know how he did it. You have to
Strong-willed, very
you have to
strong-willed.
have a mind of exactly like the will of an army, I guess. I just it's quite a feat for sure.
I know your dad was very proud of his boxing record. Your dad was a boxer as a young man.
He
Now, I
loved
read
it.
this, and I know what I read. So
Yeah.
what I read might not necessarily be true because I know working in law enforcement, being at crime scenes and something's written, I'm like, well, that's not what happened.
Right.
But one of the stories I read about your dad was allegedly when he got locked up later in life, when they were processing him, one of the FBI agents asked him about his boxing record and said like he basically he let his guard down for that split second and just kind of rattled off his boxing record or said the reason I stopped boxing was because of this. There was like a brief exchange like that just made him come out for that split second out of character. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I think Dad came out of character a couple of times, especially when he was away before he died. He loved boxing, loved it. He might have went that way as a career if he wasn't brought into this. But this, like anybody young, and the family had no money. Everybody was struggling, and so Vito just, took him under his wing and loved my dad. He was very charismatic, my dad. So most people loved him just to be around, not even for who he was. And I know he's come to me and he has said there was one opportunity he had to walk away. And if he would have, it wouldn't have went this way. And he said he just went the opposite direction. And so he said my ego got the best of me. He wanted to make sure his family was taken care of. It was enticing what he was being offered. And once he decided for sure that's what he wanted, there was no going back, and he knew it.
Do you think if he could have done it again, he would have went another way?
Knowing him now, yes. If he had his ego connected to him, I don't know.
Our ego is the downfall of most of us.
Yes. So yeah, I know my mother would have been, ecstatic if she didn't like the whole boxing thing because she didn't want him to get hurt.
Right.
but it's different than,
Right.
what she had to put up with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your father's strength is keeping everybody off balance. Did he ever share with you strategies that would prepare you for adulthood?
No, I pretty much was on my own when it came to that. Because when I came, you have to understand, I was born in 1967, and my father was way past just being a lieutenant or anything like that. Like he was, in the mix of it. So me growing up, I had to rely on the people around me, which wasn't easy because they had their own things going on, including my mother. But there were beautiful people put in my life that were actually able to teach me certain things. And then it was me, knowing that I had to teach myself and do things on my own. So it was a lot of, there was stress around that because, it's, you growing up, you get into like the phase of 10 years old, and then you're going into puberty, and then you're going into
Right.
preteen, and then teen, and then adulthood, and and you're living in a house that suppresses women's voices. Women are supposed to get married, have children, and take care of their mother. There was not a oh, why don't you go to college, or why don't you do this? Nobody ever said to me, what do you feel like? What do you think you would want to do, when you get out of school? Or do you even want to go to college, or blah, blah, blah? It was all me making those decisions.
Yeah, and you see, I would have thought that he would have, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that. I guess he was old school.
He was old school. And you shouldn't do this or that was, you shouldn't, so funny. Because when I tried to come out to him as being gay at 19, he reacted in a way that I never thought. He was so calm and so gentle about it. And he just told me I was going through a phase and that, I'll meet the right person. But he didn't want me to be around guys. And he didn't want me to be
Right,
around
at the
girls.
same time, right.
Right, at the same time, like, where was I? I should be a spinster then, right? So, yeah, I mean, those are the words they used back then.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And so, of course, I lived my life regardless. He wasn't home that often in my house in Old Japan. And at the age of 24, I finally said to my mother, I can't live a lie anymore. I'm tired of living lies. I was sick, physically ill because I was living lies, And so I finally came out to my mother, which she accepted me. She was more afraid of my soul going to hell because she had that whole
Right.
belief system. But we all came to terms with that, and she was fine with it in the end. But those were, or I shouldn't go to a certain place. The one thing he didn't want me to do was massage therapy. I went to school for it. And he was so afraid of me touching people. This was a no-no. And my mother, who was my advocate my whole life, said, leave her alone, let her do it. That's something she wants to do. That's when I realized I had the gifts that I have. I knew I had gifts, but I didn't know to the extent until I started putting my hands on people and feeling the energy. And then I could figure out what was going on with them, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. I was getting information from that, from all of that, from the spirit world. And that's how I began to connect. And then I was introduced to people that understood that kind of work and were able to help me further my own work. It was a work in progress. It still is.
Aren't we all?
Exactly. Exactly.
Your dad, again, from what I read, your dad had a great sense of humor. When he would see like a news segment about himself, like were you ever around him when they're showing him on TV? Was he amused?
He was amused, but he loved it. I mean, his ego.
Really?
Oh, he loved it. His ego loved that. Whenever he was in a newspaper, he would show my sister, blah, blah, blah. And say, look, 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 look. And you could see it in his face. Like there was it's almost like, no news is bad news because you're in, they have you all, all over the place and they're talking about you, right? So, so there were parts of him that his ego enjoyed, and it's funny because when I did one of my first interviews was with the Daily News, and Unfortunately, they weren't the best energy to go with, but I don't know, I got like 6 pages, and this after my father died and everything. I like 6 to 10 pages. I can't even remember how many pages. And I was laughing to myself because I heard him laughing, like, look, you made the paper, like you made it like even bigger than me, he's going, and that's when I was cracking up, thinking to myself, shit, like he showed his colors here, like he loved being splashed out. But it was funny. It was good. We got a laugh out of that.
There's a really good book. I don't know if you've read it. It's called The Five Families.
I have not read it.
It's by this author, Selman Robb. He actually just passed away the other day. It's a thick book, and it's got stories about each family. And there's a huge section about your father from beginning to end, and it's entitled The Pajama Game, which
I love it.
I thought was pretty amusing. And there's some stories in there. Again, I don't know how true they are, but it points to your dad as the character he was,
Right.
and just the way he would do things. And there's a story in there, and I've read this more than one time. Your dad, later in life, I mean, when he was running things, to test a guy's loyalty, he would summon them somewhere in Lower Manhattan, in his territory, at 2, 3 in the morning. You got to get down here. He would have he wouldn't make the call, obviously.
Of course.
And the guy would show up, and one particular guy that he has down there, he sees him and he goes, "Oh, good, you showed up. Okay, you can go." And the guy was like, "Oh, okay." Like, the guy was terrified. Like, first he was terrified getting called down there at 3 o'clock in the morning, didn't know what was going to happen to him. And then your father just looked, and your father winked at him and said, "And if anyone asks, you can tell them I'm crazy, because I am." And I mean, I think that kind of just sums up your father. I mean, it's something it's like a Hollywood character.
He could have definitely been in the movies. There's no doubt in my mind. But I didn't know about that kind of story growing up, but I could absolutely see that in him and that happening. There's no doubt in my mind he would have done something like that.
In 1988, your dad had open heart surgery, which is traumatic.
Yes.
Did he reflect on life, or he just went right back to work?
Well, he had to recover. He recovered uptown in the other woman's place, and he was on. I think he already had the cuff around him. Anyway, I mean, he was recovering, and then all hell broke loose with him, going away and all that. I don't think that changed anything. It kind of was, next.
Speed bump.
Yeah, it kind of was next. He was strong. We knew he was surviving. It wasn't his time yet. He actually knew he was probably going to pass in jail. He said to them when he went away, he's like, "I'm not coming out of here unless I'm in a box." Because at that point, they just wanted him, and they were going to do whatever they had to do to keep him. Because he only got 12 years, right?
But it was his age and his health, which is essentially a death sentence.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. He was healthy. If he would have come out, he would have survived. There's no doubt in my mind. But we don't know. There's speculation about his medication and if they gave it to him right, and he was filling up with water, and supposedly that's how he passed. His lungs filled up with water. So if he would have come out, he had a great doctor. He would have definitely been okay.
Yeah, prison hospitals aren't known for the best medical treatment.
Right.
When I was a kid, the stories with your dad, your father had a brother who was a Catholic priest.
Louis
Gigante was, and he would be with your father and stuff. Did he ever catch any heat from the Catholic Church? Like, did they ever say to him, like, "What are you doing"? Because he was basically your dad's alibi for decades.
Not that I'm aware of, but my father took good care of them. So like anybody in those big corporations, I want to say,
Right? Yeah.
can be bought. So no, and my father did help my uncle do a lot of good in the Bronx for people. So there was like one hand washes the other, kind of thing. Yeah.
And your dad was brought up Catholic.
Yeah.
Did he believe in God? Was he religious?
My God, 5 rosaries a day.
Really?
icons of saints and Jesus and Mary everywhere. 5 rosaries a day. It's so interesting. It was such a big thing in our house, the rosary, and my grandmother was very connected to the Blessed Mother and Saint Rita, who they named me after. But they would say it together. My father, my mother, and the 4 kids before I was born would say the rosary every day together. When I was born and they named me Rita, my mother was sitting down and she was like playing with the initials of our names, and our names ended up spelling out rosary, which was crazy. Because it was such a connection. And my father's like, well, what about me? Like he was left out. So it was Roseanne, Olympia, Sal, Andrew, Rita, Yolanda, which spelled out rosary. And my mother said to him, you're the V, the 5 decades of the rosary. Like his first initial is V, and he's like, oh, okay. So he didn't want to be left out. It was like a very, that's when you saw like a piece of him, like you go, wow, there's a little bit of like kid in him, He was like, well, what about me?
That's what I find interesting, like this tough guy that basically keeps everyone guessing. And that's kind of what I wanted to know today. Like, did your dad let his guard down? Like, what kind of guy he was? He sounds like he was quite he probably was a really interesting, highly intelligent. To pull that off for that long, to come up with that idea, to be able to pull it off. And like the other mafia families, everything I read about him, that John Gotti would show up on wiretaps bashing the other families. He never mentioned your father on a wiretap.
That was a no-no. But even sometimes like because you want to know about his coming out of character. There was even jealousy, like a little jealousy with the other kids when they would come and see my grandmother. He was extremely close to her because he lived with her. And so you can see there was a little bit of jealousy when she would pay more attention to them, than him. It would upset him. So those are other ways he came out of character. And I remember him getting a weekly massage. This is what interested me about massage therapy. A guy they called Jerry the Rubber, right? That was his nickname. Jerry is actually still in contact with me today. He was a lovely, lovely human being. And he always texts me and asks me about the family and sends his love and all of that. He was just the greatest guy. He would come in and put my father on a table and like massage him in a way that I've never seen, like slap him and, and like move him like roughly and, stretch him in a way that I can't believe even how like my father was so, I don't know, like the way he was able to move him. I really thought like my father at one point would get up and crack this guy because of the way he was moving him on the table, But he loved it. Like twice a week he would get a massage. One time I wasn't there, but always once I would see him, and this is what he did. And then he would get on his bicycle, his stationary bike, and he would be riding his stationary bike and doing hand weights and saying to me, this is good for you. You should be doing this kind of stuff. And I'm cracking up and I'm going, I do this kind of stuff every day. But these are the things he would come out with, And that I was like, oh, there he is. There's my dad. So yeah, funny stuff.
What would people be surprised to know about your dad?
That he was funny.
I can see it. Just some of the photos, the surveillance photos and stuff. He's got like that little boy in him.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm doing it. And you can't prove it.
You can't get me.
He's got like a cigar, before he really started, really with the mumbling and stuff. But because it was a progression of an act that just got better and better. He could have gotten an Oscar.
Oh my God. And some of the pictures I have of him, hysterical, like the way he dressed up, kind of like where I got it from, because he would get dressed up in different things and have pictures taken of him. I was the same way, and that was probably the biggest thing that people would be surprised of, that he had a sense of humor, and if he could get himself in that place, you could see it. And when you mentioned that little boy in him, that was what my mother never forgot. because I said to her, Mom, why did you stay? Like, you suffered so much, just for what he, the things he did, and then having another family and all of that. And she said, because I never forgot, the innocence of that 10-year-old, that they would, my grandmothers knew each other. These kids were playing when they were babies on the rooftop. They grew up together. These are the things she remembers about him and want people to know, that there were pieces of him that nobody understood, but that she always kept deep in her heart.
Yeah, he stole her heart at an early age.
100%.
What's your fondest memory of your dad?
This is before he died, so, because I have a lot of memories after he died, but before he died, I have to think about that for a second, my fondest memory. So I would, when we would go to Joe's restaurant around the corner from us, that was the restaurant that for every holiday, because the family got too big to be in my grandmother's apartment. So we would go to Joe's restaurant, and we would always go through the back way. So we went through this hallway, and the door opened up, and there was this huge table, long table, and this is where we went. We only went to the front. The kids were allowed to go to the front, but it was a very small restaurant, and we would go and get the Shirley Temples and all of that. But I remember, him relaxing at the table with his family, and I would sit on his lap, and anytime he took a picture, he had this greatest smile, and it was nice to see that. And one time, he knew I had an affinity for Farrah Fawcett. I always knew I would meet her. I don't know why, but I just knew. I had her posters and everything.
Me too.
Oh, I knew I knew I was gay from such a young age, right? I don't even know how this happens, but she comes to Joe's restaurant. I'm 10 years old, and she's in the front, having a dinner with her manager, and we're in the back having dinner, the whole family, and I begged him to get me an autograph. Well, not only did he get me an autograph, I got introduced to her. They brought me to the front. They introduced me to her. I still have her autograph on paper today. And she was the nicest person you could meet. She was so kind. And I was on cloud nine. And that, for me, was like the end-all, be-all. That memory, for me, was incredible.
That night out.
Yeah, that he was able to, get that to happen and wanted to do it. Because when I came back, I thanked him and I hugged him and I kissed him and I said, that was the best thing. And he goes, I'm happy that you're happy, and that was it. That's got to be probably one of my fondest.
Rita, I hope you take this as a compliment, but you remind me so much of legendary actress Anne Bancroft.
Oh, really?
Not only do you look like her when she was younger, but your delivery, it's uncanny.
Really?
Yes. I was telling people that because you and I spoke on the phone a couple of times. I go, I feel like I'm talking to Anne Bancroft.
No, I have to look her up now.
You don't know who that is?
I know who it is, but now I have to see what you mean,
Oh, definitely. You should have went into acting. You have a delivery. It's no nonsense.
Yeah, I've always wanted to do something. I just don't want to be in that limelight. Like, I wouldn't mind doing it. Kind of like, you're familiar with Sebastian Maniscalco?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I could actually would love to do some of the stuff he does, but not necessarily be in all of that limelight. It's too much for me, And plus, I have a I want to say such a connection to the spirit world and helping others. I almost wish I could do it in that form. But I am working on maybe getting my book into a show or a documentary or a movie. And so who knows? Like I'm constantly working on stuff like that. But I would love to do it. I would. It would make me very happy. I did a one-woman show. I created the whole thing, and I did it in New York City twice. And it was like the highlight of my day. It was like, oh my God, I was actually able to talk to people about the book and what Spirit wanted me to get across to people, and almost like act it out at the same time, And it was great. It was one of my best times. Honestly.
You enjoyed it.
I did. I so enjoyed it. So I would do it. If someone said to me, I would love to be in a comedy because that's my thing. I love to, make people laugh. But who knows? We'll see what is in store.
Rita, could you please hold up a copy of your book?
Absolutely.
Tell us the title and where my listeners can find it.
Yep. So it's The Godfather's Daughter, an unlikely story of love, healing, and redemption. They can get it on my website, ritagigante.net. And then I will send them a signed copy, or they can go right on Amazon and get it if they like.
And can people get a hold of you with that email address for speaking engagements?
They can go on my website for speaking engagements. My email is ritagigantepsychic@gmail.com, so they can get me that way. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I don't necessarily like to be on there.
I know what you mean.
It's a little, but of course I do it because, that's where people are. So, and I want to get to as many people as I can. But yeah, that's how they can get me.
Rita Gigante, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Vic, such a pleasure. You're such a gentleman, and I would do it any other time with you.
Thank you. As always, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Of course, my friends in Aberdeen City, Rammer, Alabama, Eatontown, New Jersey, and of course, Nova Scotia. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background and would like to be a guest on the show, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram @VicFerrari50. If you enjoy the content, just check out my Amazon author page. Just type in my name, Vic, Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my NYPD books for free. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.